Great, so welcome to Chapman Connect, hosted by PRCA, and we are your hosts tonight, Annabelle Dunstan from Question and Retain, and Liam Fitzpatrick. Liam's going to take slightly more of a back seat today. I think he's going to mute himself, but we'll be involved in the chat. On the basis our topic is all about women in the workplace. And so we've got four really wonderful women tonight with us. We've got Emma Wheeler, Sarah Ogden, Eleanor Willock, and Rola Kamaleddine. All have various experiences and stories to share. And we're really focusing today on the impact of the pandemic on women in the workplace. So we've got in-house and agency side people to tell their stories. So wanted to just remind people on the call and those watching later on YouTube that this really is an opportunity for you to connect. So those watching, do link in with one another. And please feel free to chip in comments in the chat box. We want to know what you're thinking, if anything piques your interest or you'd like to ask any of our panel a particular question, something that relates to your organisation. So really helping you to squeeze the maximum out of this time in the coming hour. So as I said, we're looking at the impact of women, the impact of pandemic on women in the workplace. And there's been a number of reports. I know Harvard Business Review, Forbes, lots of Deloitte have been publishing articles on this. So lots of facts and figures coming out, but I just wanted to get a sense of anecdotally from our panel, whether they feel the pandemic has really adversely or otherwise affected women in their workplace. So can I come to you first, Sarah, just to give a little introduction to who you are and then to answer that question first.
Sure, thank you, Annabelle. Hi, everybody. My name's Sarah Ogden. I'm the Managing Director of Team Lewis in the UK, which is a 25 office global business focused around communications and creativity. It's about 500 of us, about 120 odd and growing in the UK. So this is a topic that's very personal to me, I guess from a career point of view, but also something that I deal with and tackle, I guess on a daily basis. And I think with that introduction, you have to remind me of the question, Annabelle. No.
So this is the broad topic, how has the pandemic affected women in the workplace, and that of your clients as well?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think really the question is, how is it still affecting women in the workplace? Because I don't think, when none of us, as we know, are elastic bands that have kind of suddenly snapped back to the way things were. Obviously what we all know is that there's lots of new behaviours. But also, the world keeps spinning and generations keep coming into the workforce who've never experienced the office or, working in a way that maybe some of us are very familiar with. So I think the interesting thing for me kind of came up actually in some work we did for another client about their workplace and how they attract employees, talk about cobblers and shoes. And we were really sort of thinking about the importance of nuance and personalization and how much more personalized our relationship with work has become, for a number of reasons, partly that, we're now working, some of us in our living rooms or, what the blend, that work-life blend, that infamous holy grail of the blend, has kind of shifted another gear. And actually that there are benefits of that, I believe, for women and for, bringing more diverse people into certain industries. But I think it also comes at a cost and a price. And I think on that note, I think what's particularly interesting, certainly in the UK, and I don't see it as much in other markets, is because we're slightly ahead of some of the other countries with regards to the pandemic and our coming out of the pandemic, for want of a description. I'm certainly seeing and experiencing now this kind of return to some old things that we were familiar with: events, parties, get-togethers, client meetings face-to-face, but actually quite an entrenched culture around the Zoom calls and the frequency of being always on. And actually what we're experiencing is, people who were probably struggling with the many dimensions of pandemic and the implications of it, both professionally and personally, but now they're coming up to this kind of bumper moment where, what we've got used to is now come up against what we want to go back to. And I think that is bringing with it its own burden, I think, in terms of how we structure our days and really what is the rhythm of business today? What does that look like?
Fantastic. That's lots of stuff to get our teeth into. Emma, do you want to come back on that? First introduce yourself and then your experience of how the pandemic's affected women in the workplace.
Thank you, and hello everybody. I'm Emma Wheeler. I'm responsible for the Women's Wealth Programme at UBS Global Wealth Management. And a mini disclaimer from me, just to say that these views are my personal views and not those of UBS that I'm sharing today. Yeah, I'm really interested to hear Sarah's comments. I mean, I think that, you know, it's affected all women, hasn't it? And many people in many ways. And I think we're all just about working out what actually those impacts, you know, the impact of that has been on us. And, you know, and trying to adjust and adjust to, you know, a new way of working again. But I think for a lot of the, you know, client-facing businesses, it was very much about keeping close to your clients all through the pandemic. And I think the businesses that have been really successful through the pandemic are those that really nailed that. You know, so I think what has come from it has been, you know, better client relationships in many ways. And, you know, that's key to what I do because, you know, I'm responsible for encouraging women to take control of their finances and getting started with investing. So, and that has been interesting because, you know, women have been spending more time in their homes with their families. And actually many more of them are getting engaged in their finances as a result of that. I think they've been thinking about the impact of, you know, health and you know, the pandemic on the world, on the climate, you know, and how can they use their wealth in a purposeful way, and how can they talk to their children about that too. So I think there've been lots of, you know, great conversations that have impacted the way that we work, particularly from a female perspective.
That's really interesting. That was an unforeseen side effect of the pandemic, I guess, isn't it? Women talking about their finances differently. I like that as a thread. Eleanor, can I come on to you? Please do introduce yourself. And to perhaps we've talked a lot quite generally, but can you draw out the differences, perhaps if there are any, between the different impact on women versus men?
Okay, hi everyone, my name is Eleanor Willock. I am the Managing Director at Mantis PR. Mantis is the GovTech division of Rudafin, which is our parent company as of October last year. So there was big changes at our business through that, which affected all of us, not just the women or the men. Are women impacted more than men? I think more is maybe not the right word. Differently, yes. I've made a point over the last few weeks of speaking to as many women as possible within our business and within PR in general to talk about the different kinds of impacts and try and get a bit of background on how people have been feeling, particularly because it's probably written all over my face for those of you who can see it, but I am in my 40s, I'm a managing director, I have 2 kids and I don't live in London. So I've got a very niche pandemic experience and one that has been discussed ad infinitum all over the press all the time. It honestly sometimes felt like it only happened to working mothers, the pandemic, some of the stuff that was said. And of course, that's not the case. I think that confidence and appetite for risk is something that is traditionally associated with the male role in the workplace. And I think that the impact on professionals in general was more about your confidence and your appetite for risk as we went through the pandemic, rather than what gender orientation you were. But I do hear more women talking about how post-pandemic they're left with more confidence issues, more ruefulness about that period in general in terms of their career, perhaps a lot more sort of regret and looking back. I think women in general seem to be looking back on it if they want to even think about it at all. I think we've probably all experienced quite good evidence of women's work-life balance tipping towards work during this time. Especially those who perhaps were living in environments where they didn't have anything else to bring it back. So I will be eternally grateful to all my colleagues who don't have children during that time, because they stepped in for me and my colleagues who do more times than I could count when it counted, and it probably changed their careers and their perception of work as well. I think that we're working to catch up with the ramifications of the pandemic now, literally working to catch up with it, as well as catching up with men on pay inequality where that isn't there. So it's more work, it's that mental load that, again, we talk about. It's done nothing but add to that. And lastly, I'd say anecdotally, we all have experiences of the dynamic changing in our relationships because of this. Suddenly having your partner, whether they're male or female, at home whilst you're working, and probably finding out more about your work than they ever knew before, has changed the dynamic of how you live together, to whether they have been quietly impressed at how much you get through during the day, or how it is that you work and what you need, or even hearing their voice when you're trying to be on a conference call. All these things have changed the way that we work and relate to other people around us. So to go back to the original question, I think it's just impacted us differently, not more.
Thank you, Eleanor. That's really comprehensive run through the differences and similarities that you've observed. Rola, can I come to you next? And I'm going to throw a curveball question in, but the question I wanted to ask you originally was, have there been any positive outcomes from the pandemic in your view? But also just picking up on that point about the hybrid working now, perhaps juniors coming to the workplace who aren't spending as much time in the office as they did. Are you getting the training, the mentorship, are you getting noticed as you would like to? I know a lot of HRs are finding it difficult to balance that juggle between trying to get people noticed that they can step up in their careers. And I know that you're relatively new in your career at Fleischmann. So tell us more, introduce us and give me some thoughts on those points.
Hi, my name is Rola. I am an account manager at FleishmanHillard UK, specializing in consumer social purpose. So I guess I'll answer the question in two parts. So I think, the clearest and most positive outcome has been this global and collective realization that people can be just as productive working at home as they are in the office. And I think business leaders and managers have really learned now to just focus on the outputs and results instead of fussing over who's walking into the office at 9:10, which has really nurtured trust and loyalty and engagement between businesses and their employees. And this acknowledgement that employees can be just as productive at home has actually opened doors to questioning whether this one-size-fits-all structure of the 9 to 5 is actually suitable for everyone. So, work-life balance and engagement, they're interconnected. So employees, ensuring that they have the freedom and flexibility to do their best work in whatever environment best supports them is how we can actually keep them engaged at work and ultimately see businesses succeed. So then I guess on your point, things like flexi working, where people can work at home at different hours based on their needs, or hybrid working policies that allow people to choose whether they actually prefer at home or prefer to be in the office. Those have now become options in a lot of places where they previously weren't. So this has actually a wider impact as it's made people a bit more relaxed about rigid hours. I think, it's definitely less likely now to be told off for not being at your desk before 9 than it was before the pandemic, because I think it's just given everyone a little bit of perspective on what's actually important at work. So as you said, I've only been at Fleischmann for a few months, but we do have the option for flexi working and hybrid, and I do find it promotes my work-life balance and gives me a nice flexibility to choose if I want to be at home to focus and get specific types of work done, or if I want to be in the office to engage with my colleagues and have face-to-face meetings and learn and all that kind of stuff. I think it is hard, as a second part of your question, to get the full learning experience at work if you don't have the option to go back into the office, which is why I think the hybrid environment is really key. But I think, now when you look at job postings, especially in the post-pandemic world, they now say this is fully remote, this is fully in the office, this is hybrid. So depending on what someone's style is and how they prefer to work, they can choose a job that is most suitable for them. And, I think hybrid is best, but I really think it's hard to speak for everyone. Everyone's personality and the way they work is just so unique to each person, which is why this has come out as a positive in post-pandemic world.
Okay, thank you. Emma, can I turn to you? Would you say that post-pandemic women are now approaching their career development, their choices about going for promotion, on stepping up differently to that they would have done pre-pandemic and differently to men?
I think that I think this is our time. You know, I think that, you know, we've survived a pandemic, we've juggled so much, you know, we've learned from it. And, you know, picking up on Rola's point about, you know, how businesses are more flexible now, I think they're listening. I really do. I think they're listening. And now is the time for women to say, you know, this is how I want to work, and this is what suits me, and, you know, this is why. And I think that a lot of them have been having, you know, we've been having conversations in our families with our partners about sharing responsibilities. I think that's a big thing that's come out for a lot of people, particularly couples with young children, you know, juggling the young children and, you know, both having careers. And, you know, the actual sort of coming back to work phase has meant that a lot of them have had to have these conversations about, you know, which days they're working on, so that they can juggle the childcare, but that it's a much more equal conversation and landscape. And yeah, I just keep encouraging people do ask me this a lot, you know, and I just say just ask now, because I think, you know, businesses are listening. They want to know, you know, how to make the most of their workforce, and, you know, to create the right environment, because I think there's no cut and dried approach right now.
Thank you, Sarah. Do you want to pick up on that? I know from a recruitment point of view, clearly we've been through the big scare of the Great Resignation. PR talent is always a scarce commodity. Do you find that women are coming to interviews with more demands, being more confident, saying what they really want? Have you seen that as a trend?
There's a small element of that. I think just before kind of digging into that, I just wanted to pick up on something actually that Rola said about, you know, I feel like there's a bit of one of many elephants in the room when we think about workplace and women, and it's this notion for me about productivity. And I almost find that word toxic in its own right, to think about work and to think about us as humans as units of production, and that, you know, and that getting work done is sitting behind a screen or sitting on your own with a computer. Now, I freely accept there is a mass diversity of jobs, you know, scientists in labs, doctors in surgeries, you know, you name it. And I will try not to be over biased by my own experience, but this is the PRCA, right? And I think so in the context of our industry, you know, something that kind of makes me a little bit sad is this idea that work in our industry is about that kind of transactional nature of the job, because I think fundamentally this is a business built on relationships, and that it's an expertise built on relationships and interhuman skills. I mean, 93% of how we communicate is nonverbal, and, you know, you need to be able to gather those 93% of inputs by seeing people in human form. And, you know, and I think, you know, there's a big danger in the mission towards flexibility and productivity, that it all comes at a cost. Everything comes at a cost, right? And I think for us as an industry, we need to be really thoughtful about those costs, or the things that we're letting go of to gain something else. Because I think in the long run, it is the loss of those things that will compromise careers, it will compromise happiness and mental health, and it will compromise the quality and the creativity and the things that we can achieve together as humans.
Powerful stuff. Thanks, Sarah. Ellen, I could see you nodding and waving pen. What are your thoughts on Sarah's there?
I think I probably agree with Sarah, probably 99% of that. Probably 100% actually.
I was going to go, what's the 1% then?
Well, the way I feel about it is, I think we're both coming from it from the same. I think we've all proved that we can. You know, I did a new business pitch literally with my legs in a paddling pool in 2020, whilst I'm trying to fend off all sorts. But whether we should is another matter. And I feel as I move to the sort of higher end of senior management in PR, that I have a big responsibility to ensure that the people who work for us get what they need from a job with us. I've always tried to make it so that if ever anybody does leave Mantis, they leave thinking, I really liked working there and I learned a lot. And our team have always been remote. So from day 1 to day 2 of the pandemic, nothing changed, apart from we didn't go into our serviced offices once or twice a month. But we did stop seeing each other. And the more junior members of our team lost that ability to hear the more senior members of the team do what they do, learn by, watching and listening, etc., etc. There's only a finite amount of emails telling you how to do something that you'll ever listen to, that you'll read through. But I think the thing that I feel really strongly about as well is that we can't treat post-pandemic talent as an experiment or a case study. We can't sit there and try and model this the way we want it to be. Everybody I spoke to had such a unique perspective on this. One issue, going back to what Rola was saying earlier, that I haven't really considered is that there's experience of women who feel that this 2 years left them standing still on lots of communications aspects, those 93% that you were talking about, Sarah, and that in those 2 years, more women have joined their businesses who effectively they feel are snapping at their heels now because they've got the same experiences, because they have a 2-year gap, they feel, in their personal experience of doing their job. And they're worried and concerned about remaining competitive within the industry. I would never have thought of it that way. And I think that's another thing that we need to get used to as senior business leaders, women in business, the difference, the changes in ambition and emotion involved in women's careers. It's not how it was when I was a young woman. And I can't judge it anymore on that, refuse to judge it on that. We should be listening much more, as you said earlier.
Thanks, Eleanor. And Juliet's just dropped a comment into the chat there saying she was shocked to read the Harvard Business Review quote that 47% participation of women in labour force. Can you clarify the basis of this? We'll come back to you on that, Juliet, because we quoted that in the promotion of the event, so we'll come back to you on that. But Rola, I'd be interested to know, as an up-and-coming new talent in the comms sector, what do you think leaders need to consider when managing women in particular, on the basis that's the focus for today, in developing their careers?
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. In a time when a lot of meetings are still virtual, and we will likely continue to see elements of this for the foreseeable, I think it's important for leaders to ensure women's voices are still being heard at all levels, right from entry level through to the boardroom. And things that we've worked towards in the past, like ensuring women get a seat at the table, that they contribute to conversations and decision-making, and just simply being able to finish a sentence without being cut off. All of that now takes a different form when you take things on Zoom and onto Teams, but they're still just as important. It's easy now for someone to, for example, forget to add you to a virtual invite, and you'd have no idea that the meeting happened without you because you're not there to see them. And it's easier for women to hide behind the screens with their mics turned off. It's just easier also on virtual meetings for you to be cut off because you're not able to stand up and take control of the room when you're speaking. So leaders need to be aware of this more and encourage women on their teams to practice the same authority virtually as they would in person. And if they notice anyone struggling, to make sure it's addressed and they're supported, and just keep pushing forward in that area, just as you would in person.
Yes, that's an interesting thought, isn't it? Because at the boardroom table, you're taught to lean in, but what do you do on a Zoom call? You can't really press your face up against the camera, but yeah, good observation there, Rola. Emma, can I come to you? Because in discussing this before the call, we were talking about perhaps those with caring responsibilities or with disabilities will tend to stay at home given the choice, whereas other employees will likely go into the office. Do you think that might affect promotions and pay rises on the basis of less visibility, less being able to put yourself forward for opportunities? question to Emma.
I mean, I think that's people have those responsibilities at every level. So I'm not sure that that's just about the workforce and the senior management. But I think there's greater opportunity for them, as I said before, to ask for what they want, how they want to work, and no, I don't think that it's just about that they will struggle necessarily to get to know, or I don't think there is as much coffee chat going on anymore. I mean, I'm not seeing that. I mean, our office is probably a third full now, and I think there's no pressure from the business to come back to work anymore. So I think the businesses that have been successful are happy to let people continue to work in the way that they're comfortable, and so that's my impression. And as I said before, I think now is the time for women to ask for what they, how they want to work, to tell the business. But, to Eleanor's point, I do think it's about the tone from the top. And, that's really important. And I mean, I can see that really operating in my business, and I'm, grateful for that. So I encourage all those senior leaders definitely to continue to listen and take note, and that's how their businesses longer term will be successful.
Okay, we've got a comment from Liam here. He's curious to know who we think are leaders as organisations. Has anyone got any best practice, any clients who you think are absolutely nailing it in terms of how to manage women in the workplace post-pandemic? Then interesting to hear. Welcome Merapy to the call. I've just noticed you there. I'd love to hear a comment from AML on your thoughts on impact of pandemic on women, if you'd like to.
Thanks, Annabelle. Hello, everyone. I've been sitting here listening and thinking, God, I feel like I'm on some seesaw. Like basically, there's pros and cons for working from home, working from the office. So my perspective is, women didn't set up the working day. Otherwise, the school day and the working day would be more aligned. So I didn't feel particularly wedded to that as a structure. And it certainly was great to be able to work from home, which I started doing when I had my first child, which was 16 years ago. So, but then there is the tyranny of the office being in the palm of your hand with mobile, which also isn't great either. And you definitely need boundaries with that 24/7 access. And let's not forget just how exhausting that is. So for me, the kind of pandemic and working from home is a real opportunity to reset things. But I'm not sure what the ideal future scenario is. I think it is probably a blend. I don't think it's in women's best interest to work purely from home. And that's for them. Because A, they see all the domestic stuff that still hasn't been done. My washing machine is currently beeping at the end of its cycle and it's driving me crazy. And I think blokes don't see that. But secondly, you don't get those learning experiences and the tangential conversations that lead to interesting things. I've observed, lockdown has suited the introverts, not the extroverts. And yes, we've all been equal on our little panels on our screens, but there's been I've loved the banter. When I go into the office, I love the banter. I love the tangential conversations. I love the kind of what ifs and the builds. And you just can't do that very easily on Zoom. So that's my ramble. I don't have a future state that I think is in my mind's eye, but I think it is a bit of work from home and a bit of office. And I also don't think every individual should determine that balance. I think organizations do have to have their own culture.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else like to join in at this point? I'm conscious this is Chat and Connect. So I
was just going to mention as well, sorry, just off the back of that, I couldn't agree more with you. Like, it's sort of dizzying. It's so hard to take a position when actually, like, oh, I can see it both sides. One of the things that we're moving towards, we've stayed on 100% flexible models, so there's no 3-2 or anything like that, and actually we don't even have fixed working hours in a way, but I think there's a very strong kind of working culture that's remained throughout regardless. However, what I am seeing, and that we're keen to keep moving on, is that there's a bit of a change in how we use the office, and therefore what the space of the office is. And I read a brilliant quote from someone the other day who said, the irony now is that we should put our out of office on when we're in the office. The point being that when we're in the office, don't expect us to be sat in front of a screen, waiting for your email, being ready to respond, because when we're in the office, we're socializing, we're in meetings, we're kind of, saving the working from home for those, the thoughtful work pieces, the writing, the kind of quiet calls, the time to think perhaps in your own kind of quiet solace. Whereas we use the time in the office more deliberately. You don't want someone to have to come to the office and do the same thing they can do at home. Use the office differently and have those social interactions. Find those moments of creative serendipity where that you can kind of have breakthroughs, and also where all the learning and the care comes that you get from a workplace, the kind of social contract you have with an employer, where you feel valued and you feel seen, and also the business is palpably investing in you, in terms of your education and training and development. So I think that's what we're seeing, and we're seeing our office very much more as a kind of social dynamic space.
Fantastic. Amy, can I bring you in at this point? You put something in the chat, but would you like to share it with us?
Yes, yeah, it's quite lengthy because I wanted to get down what I was going to say. But so I'm new to PR in that I've had experience of freelance theatre projects. So obviously pre-pandemic, theatre was unimpacted, and so we secured through partnering with a PR company coverage on ITV and things like that. So I've had kind of more non-traditional experience, but because of the impact that the pandemic has had on theatre, I'm looking to transition into comms. And so I was wondering what your advice would be to someone who's really totally new to it, in terms of an office setting, and whether there are any specific support structures for people who are just getting to grips with it, essentially.
I'm loving this. It's like a pitch for a job. You've got 2 MDs on the call. And
I've already DM'd her, don't worry.
Amazing.
Needs go-getters, people who are prepared to turn up to events like this. So I'm sure you've already started the journey into a new full-time comms role. But the PRCA has a wealth of contacts and networks, and I'm happy to have a chat with you after this as well. But any thoughts from the people on the call as to what Amy could be thinking about?
I've got one thing to say. First of all, fair play, well done for coming and saying that. Big deal. Whatever you do, you're going to do great. But it's related to what Sarah was saying, because it's do you remember the first meeting, face-to-face meeting back from the pandemic, when everyone literally sat there all talking at once because nobody had a clue what to do? If you're just starting your career, or you've missed the first 2 years of your career, we shouldn't underestimate what a big deal walking into an office is and how that feels. We've even joked about it, as in we've talked about how we're going to walk into the office, literally, physically, how one walks into an office. And again, we've got this responsibility, haven't we, to set that tone about what being in an office should be like. And I think what Sarah's saying about the way Lewis runs things sounds great, because it is all about making sure that people have that new access to expectation about what an office environment should be, how we converse with each other, how we meet, how we brainstorm, how you're expected to react when a senior person asks you to do something or asks you to work with them. What a challenging situation looks like face to face. There will be people who've never had critical feedback in person, face to face. And that is really hard to deal with, as is praise for introvert extroverts. Sitting there and being praised by a room full of people in a company meeting on Zoom is completely different to being praised face to face, as is office drinks, as is your first Friday night out. you know, as is your first client drinks, gosh, all these things have to be really carefully managed, and that is our responsibility. And Amy, Victoria, if you're feeling nervous about that kind of thing, don't be nervous about it. But when you walk into an office for an interview, however you choose to walk, pay real attention to how people communicate with each other, who's in there, what they're talking about, ask questions. You know, it is all about communication, and you know, it's our responsibility, really.
I wondered if coming off the back of what you were saying, Rola, about women sort of having confidence to take control of the room, and the attitude that you bring in when you enter an office or enter a pitch or whatever experience it is, whether women do sort of take longer to adjust to having that same level of assertiveness and level of authority, or if that's something that you feel has changed now as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think imposter syndrome is a lot more common in women than it is men. And that is something that has stayed consistent pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, and has probably become more so now, because if we've stopped having these in-person meetings and being able to take control of a room, and just sitting, you know, when you're sitting on Zoom and you're doing an interview, you could literally have a Word document with points in front of you, and so you can sit there and read off a script, and that is so, can give you that confidence when you can't do that in person anymore. So now we just have to start getting used to that again, but just being conscious of that imposter syndrome. And you know, I really recommend getting a mentor, or even just if you have any friends or making friends in the comms sector, and being able to bounce ideas off them. Most jobs, especially with agencies, will ask you to do a presentation for an interview, being able to share that presentation with someone and have someone talk you through it. And I think that can really bring back some of that confidence. I definitely suffer from imposter syndrome, and I can't like give you advice on how to get through it, because I go through it all the time. But you know, Annabelle's amazing. She's on this call, but singing praises to Annabelle, because I met her when I was doing my master's, and she, you know, was amazing in, you know, mentoring me a little bit as well. And I just think you could, yeah, meet a lot of people that you can learn a lot from, and just try and have confidence in yourself as you go.
Thank you.
Lovely. Oh, I'm all glowing now. Thank you. Receive the praise. Emma, I wanted to come back to you in particular, because this whole notion of women stepping up and finding their confidence, and you mentioned that in relation to your client base who are looking at their financial, their relationship with finances. What advice are you giving through your comms programs to women who are now reassessing their own relationship with finance? I'd be interested to know, because that could apply to how we approach our work life, perhaps.
Yes, well, I guess financial confidence is a challenge for women. There's no question about that, and that's because, you know, there are gender stereotypes that have been kind of endured through various generations of families where the male's been the main breadwinner, and of course that's all shifting. And women are about to control 35% of the world's total private wealth, and they're still not taking control in the way that they should be in terms of, you know, really investing. So, you know, that is a big challenge, but, you know, it's also an opportunity for us as an organization, and for all financial services businesses. And I think, you know, in many ways, you know, we're having to reimagine wealth advice. You know, we're having to rethink how we're advising. And, you know, a lot of that is about, you know, training our advisors to really think hard about those conversations, and to use what I call the language of curiosity. You know, the emotional intelligence somebody mentioned earlier. I think that's just so important. And yeah, I think as women continue to control wealth, and yeah, that figure is doubling every decade. You know, female owned and controlled wealth is growing faster than male control wealth. So, you know, I think, you know, yeah, a big change for us in terms of, you know, how we're advising. I just wanted to pick up on the point that was made before, because I think the whole lean in point is so important. And, you know, I know we've talked about senior leaders. I'm very conscious in all meetings that I'm in, you know, whether physically or on the phone, of young people, particularly young women, giving them the opportunity to speak. And I think that that's a really, you know, important opportunity for everybody in a senior position, you know, to be reading the room and thinking now about who is there, and inviting them to speak, or you know, just encouraging them, or before a meeting saying to them, you know, is there something that you would like to add to the conversation? So I think that's really important. I just wanted to add too, yesterday I ran a training session in person, and I actually felt much more confident delivering that presentation than I think I've ever done before. And of course, you know, I've been around for a while, but yeah, and I think it's all those presentations that we've been giving on Zoom, you know, constantly doing them. So I'd like to think that's a sort of personal positive thing that's come out of the pandemic. Yeah, sorry, you were going to ask me a question.
No, I think I've asked you, but I can come back to you. But first of all, I wanted to make sure that everybody on this call is having an opportunity to speak. So Ravina, Catriona, is there anything that's piqued your interest? Or I'm putting you on the spot, I know, but I said 2 names, so one of you might want to.
No, I can quickly. I was actually just sitting in the room with Sarah, so I think all the points that you've made are very valid, and I think we're all going through it, you know, in some shape or form. I think personally for me, I was saying to Sarah just ahead of this that I think one of the challenges, I mean, I worked at Lewis for about 12 years, and, you know, I've been used to coming to office 5 days a week, then went to 4 days, been used to kind of the 8:30 to 5:30 work. And I think what COVID has done has kind of exacerbated the way you work. Because like you said, the 9 to 5 culture really doesn't work. I do think days are much longer when you're working from home, because I feel like there isn't that cutoff period, unless you're kind of really, you know, I don't have kids, so I don't have the school pickup or the school drop. So I think for me personally, it's more kind of like, when do I actually switch off? And that is one of the things that I personally am really, really struggling with, because I don't switch off. And when I come to the office, I come maybe like once or twice a week. And it is such a difference, because yeah, I am not working like I'm working at home. It's more kind of meetings or client events or whatever. And you do then realize that, you know, you've still got a lot of work done, but you're just not writing content or writing emails, etc. So, and then you just switch off and then go home. So I think it's like, I think it's kind of like self-discipline as well. Like, how do you kind of channel your mind to kind of be like, okay, like my work hour is done. Sometimes I'm like texting Sarah like at 8 o'clock in the night, being like moaning about something or saying something, and she's like, you need to step away, you need to switch off. So personally, I think that's one of my challenges, at least. So I'm still kind of learning. Like you said, it's not a one size fits all approach. And also I feel like it's really frustrating. You come to the office and you know, if you work with a large team, you know, I'd love to have my entire team with me. And I actually said to them, because my team is pretty big, it's like 18 people. I said, will there ever be a day when my entire team is here? And that day is yet to come, from the time COVID is, because it's very hybrid, right? So, and I don't want to enforce people to come just because I'm coming. So I'm still waiting for that day when my entire team is here and I can tap their shoulder and kind of get work done. So it's kind of in piecemeal at the moment, but yeah.
That's really helpful. You've painted a really interesting picture.
Sorry, I think you're on mute.
Oh, no. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ravina, thank you. That was a really, really detailed picture, and I think lots of people were resonating. There was nodding of heads. But can I pin you down? Do you think that that's unique to women in the workplace, or do you think men are similarly finding it hard to switch off? Do you think that's gender non-specific?
Yeah, I mean that is a good question. I have quite a few men actually in my team, and I'm just kind of trying to like, I think they are much better at it because they'll just be like, I'm going to the gym or I'm going to play football. I do feel that, the girls in my team work much longer hours, not sure why, but yeah,
And
I do think I don't know if it's more of why it is more of a woman thing.
Yeah.
Add that I think imposter syndrome really plays a role in that. I think women often feel like they have to go above and beyond to prove themselves to their managers, and to even feel like they can measure if they're both competing for promotion and it's between, maybe a male colleague and them, they might feel they have to work double as hard as their male colleague to be noticed, or to feel like their work is, stand out.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And kind of to what you just said, I was talking to a colleague yesterday, and it was a difficult conversation. It was I won't get into the conversation. It was about her mental health issues and what she's kind of going through. And we were just talking about how we can mix it up and kind of try and encourage her to come to the office maybe once a week even. And she said to me, and it really made me think, I haven't actually told Sarah this, but it really made me think. She said, the day I feel really crap, I can't just walk into the office. But if a guy walks into the office and feel really crap, is not looking his best, no one will kind of look at him or raise any eyebrows. But I can't do that. I do need to come to the office and make sure I look good. And yeah, I was a bit taken aback, and it made me think. And I was like, yeah, Sarah, you are right. The girl that I was talking to was Sarah. So yeah. So it just, I think women do have that extra pressure. 100% agree with that. And I don't have the solution, but I think these are great conversations to have. And I think it's just a journey, and we're all learning. I'm learning every day, because there are days when you feel like, how can I make my days smarter and more efficient and less Zoom calls? So one of the things I'm encouraging my team to do, which we're trialing for the first time next week, is the day we come into the office. So say hypothetically it's a Thursday, we will do all our client catch-ups on the Thursday. So all the client catch-ups that happen on the Monday and Tuesday, we'll cancel it, and we'll only do client catch-ups face-to-face. So let's see how that works, and hopefully the Zoom fatigue dies down a bit. But yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. We'll edit this, just I want to make sure there's an anonymity, so we'll just edit where a name was mentioned for clarity.
Yeah, sorry.
Broadcast. But thank you, that's really, really useful. Juliet, I can see a hand raised, and also there's some comments in the chat. I'll be interested for you for others to comment on, and I can come back to you on that. But over to you, Juliet.
Thanks, Anna. I just wanted to come back on what you were saying there, Ravina, and in terms of my own experience. I've come to your community, by the way, through Simon Francis. So I'm not in PR per se, but I know Simon, and I think some of the events, I'm really curious. So when I get a 47% of women uptaking it, that grabs my attention, and I'm like, what? So that, that's why I've come along tonight to understand this and explore what's actually happening. I predominantly work in quite male-dominated industries. So that's why I wanted to come back on what you were saying there, Ravina. I used to be a chemical engineer. So I'm a coach now. I work with a lot of senior leaders, predominantly men as well, because it tends to be quite tech industries as well as sort of science as well. So still in those worlds, predominantly it's men at the senior level. It is changing, but slowly. And what I've found was that, at that level, there's still the same pressure on the 24/7 availability. If the CEO wants your attention, it's Sunday night and they need you in a meeting somewhere across the world on the Monday, they will respond. So I just wanted to come back to this, that women having to do that go that extra mile and do more. Once, I think my experience is at that level, the men are feeling the pressure just as much. If they don't respond to that, what I quite toxic culture. So I think what the Zoom has done is fueled the toxic culture of you're available 24/7 at that senior level, quite badly actually. At least they had some kind of demarcation of an office and a building and a boundary. Going back to what Miropa said about boundaries, really is the key thing, and the discipline of I'm going to manage my life and my boundary with my family and my home life and my work life better. And they find that harder now, much harder after the pandemic. There's such a grey area, and it was difficult before, and they're struggling to find that again. And that's particularly the men. So I just wanted to come back with that.
Well, that's really interesting. I guess they probably have a better way to kind of not show their emotion or their stresses. Maybe we do more of that.
They show it to me.
Eleanor, you raised a hand, but I also just want to chuck into the pot there that, and Liam made the point to me as an aside, that perhaps there's been a bit of a de-bloking, as he calls it, of the workplace, in that men are encouraged to talk about their mental health and well-being, and are coming forward. They're less backward in coming forward in terms of talking about that. So there are some glimmers of hope that there's a meeting of minds between the emotional intelligence that women have had in spades for decades, and there's catch up going on. But Eleanor, you raised your hand. Sorry, I'll get overexcited.
Actually, it covers both points because it's about what Robina was saying, and everybody else. It's about the culture of a company is set by the leadership of the company, with the rest of the team inputting to start off with anyway as a company grows, right? And although there are obviously always going to be exceptional circumstances when people have to work out of hours, or clients are very demanding or based in different time zones, one has to set that culture of expectation right from the start, whether it be with a new graduate trainee, a new client, or a new AD joining you, or everybody else. And a practical example I can give is that I will always say to somebody, write as many emails as you want past 6 o'clock, but can you just queue them so they go at 8 o'clock the next morning? Because your work does not have to become everybody, your late work night does not have to become everybody else's must respond now, unless it really, really has to. And a lot of the content that we generate these days, as everybody's been saying, we can do it at different times. And I love these boilerplates that you're seeing more and more of now, which say, I don't expect you to respond now. I work these hours, but don't feel like you have to respond. And I think, we could all do with a bit more of that in certain aspects, especially because PR has changed so much. Now it's not all media relations, all churn out this, put out that. There's a lot more that can be done there.
Gosh,
the mental health point, it's the same.
Yeah.
You've just got to talk about it, haven't you? You've got to set the example. My own mental health journey has been, well documented, and everybody knows at work how I'm feeling most of the time. And as long as I keep telling people and encouraging them to tell me, then that's, what's the point in hiding it? Especially if we're all on these little screens. There's we're quite a small business compared to some of the ones here, and I'd like to think I would be able to recognise when people are struggling, and it's brilliant to hear that other agencies are talking to their teams.
Sarah, thank you, Eleanor. Sarah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment really, I guess, that, especially because we all work in the world of narratives, that I guess my real trigger switch is just like the kind of repetition of old narratives, because I think they become a massive block to everything. I mean, even ironically, sometimes I think these debates, and then we made the comment about Liam being here, actually just having women just discussing it. It's really important that women can have a women only forum, don't get me wrong, but actually sometimes the best breakthrough comes when you have the conversation with men too. And I was thinking about when you're talking about men in the workplace, and I think, or young women coming into the workplace, my experience is I see men as committed and as dedicated and as anxious about coming to the office and worried about what they look as we do women. And it manifests differently. Like, they might not talk about it as much, and they might not talk about it to me as a woman as much. They might talk about it to their male friends. But I actually think the prevalence of it and that insecurity is just as apparent in young men and people coming to the workforce as it is with women. And on that note, just again about kind of male leaders and setting a kind of culture of behavior, I think, you know, in many ways, they have to break down those social norms that's also expected of men, because they don't have to worry about the kids because they've got a wife somewhere worrying for them or a partner worrying for them, and therefore they can work late and they should work late. And actually that's the social norm that we have to help them break as well. And I think, you know, however you look at it, we're all working harder, men and women, than we've ever worked. And the workplace is, you know, impacting our social lives in ways that it's never impacted before. And that's true of men and true of women. And I think I just see every male member of my universe having pretty much parallel experiences in many ways, different but the same. And I just wanted to make that because I thought it's an important point for me.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm delighted that Catriona is raising her hand. Join
in. Yeah. Hi. Yes. So first of all, I shouldn't apologize because we're all women in business here, but I'm in my kind of toddler play clothes today as I'm with my daughter. So I've kind of just left her in the other room with my husband at the moment. But yeah, I just also, I'm finding this really interesting. One of the points that came up for me was around the extrovert introvert angle. So for myself, over the last couple of years, the kind of hybrid working has actually worked out really well. And I probably started my PR career as an introvert, and then kind of agency life has helped me move into being an extrovert almost. But I do see coming back into you know, hybrid working, seeing people in the office, I do see how it affects juniors. I just think it's interesting how you can kind of start off as a junior as an introvert, and now this could actually, yeah, as you say, it could actually kind of foster that potentially, whereas I had it kind of fostered out of me. And I'm also kind of seeing it similarly with clients as well. I'm actually seeing people that you can tell would normally be introverts but have been in the office a lot and would take meetings a lot, actually taking less meetings now. So then, you know, they're going back into their shell as well. So I do think that, you know, yeah, the introvert extrovert angle is something that we need to work on, again, specifically for women in business, because we do have that imposter syndrome, I would say, much more than men. And how do we make sure that both, you know, when we're working with junior members, how we can help them kind of move through that, but then how can we make sure that the people that we're working with to make sure that we're successful as well kind of also works out. But I just thought that was an interesting point.
Fantastic. I feel a thought leadership piece coming on. I'd love you to write it and share it with us all. It is 6 o'clock. It is 6:01 and I like to finish on time. So it remains for me to say thank you so much to our panel, Eleanor, Sarah, Rola and Emma. Thank you for taking the time, and for all the guests, all our guests that came along and joined us today. And we will publish this on YouTube, or rather PRCA will. Thanks to PRCA, and have a good rest of evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.